Our first talk takes us to the lower Traisen Valley here in Lower Austria with the longest chain of small hydropower plants in Europe. And Isabella Enne and Bernward Asprion here, so both researchers at USTP, will present the research from the KliWaSim project, which basically explores how climate change impacts the energy output of these plants using machine learning. Please welcome them on stage with a round of applause.
Okay, welcome. So in this presentation, we will introduce you to a research project at USTP. The KliWaSim project focuses on the effects of climate change for small hydropower plants. First, the project's background will be presented, and then we will explain how the project was modeled, and then we show some interim results and what challenges arose there. So the full title of the project you can read here: Simulation of Climate Adaptation and Economic Development of Small Hydropower Plants. The project runs from September 24 till February next year. There are 6 company partners involved. In addition, to the USTP, there is the Christian Hoffmann Unternehmensberatung. Hello, Christian. The Linz Center of Mechatronics, company Pegel Alarm, company Ubimet, and der Verein Kleinwasserkraft Österreich. In addition to that, there are also 4 associations. These are our power plant partners. These are all associations that are located in Lower Austria, and they represent the hydropower plants at Traisen and Kamp. And not to forget, the funding body is the Climate and Energy Fund. So here on the left side, you see one example of a small hydropower plant. This is the plant in Mühlbach am Kamp. And so, but what impacts does climate change have on these small hydropower plants? It is the case that due to the climate change, the owners of these plants in our region are asking themselves here these 2 questions. How much water will there be in the Traisen and Kamp rivers, respective in their mill streams in the future? And above all, is it still worth investing in my hydropower plants? The KliWaSim research project is using artificial intelligence to answer these questions. So KliWaSim examines the following chain of effects. First of all, the question arises: how much will it rain in the future? Die Maus? Maxine? Okay, so we're here. Ich sehe es nicht am Bildschirm, die Maus. Ja. Okay. Okay. Okay, we're here. So, first of all, the question arises: how much will it rain in the future, and what will the temperature be? That depends on how we humans deal with the climate change. And this is modeled by climate models and climate scenarios. So the estimates of the precipitation and the temperatures are dependent on what scenario you choose. So there are scenarios like business as usual, or scenarios that involve some efficient climate protection measures. Second, the flow of the main rivers, they are dependent on the precipitation and temperatures in the respective catchment areas. And from the flow of the main river, the flow of the mill stream is determined, and the flow of the mill stream determines the power generation of the power plants. And then when we apply a price model, we can calculate the revenue and the cost effectiveness of plants. Oh, lost my mouse. So the estimates of the precipitation and temperatures we didn't calculate by ourselves. This data we took we used the existing data for that. And the estimation of water levels of the main rivers is being handled by the company UBEMET. That's a company with experience in this field. But in parallel, we at USTP, we also developed some models to estimate the flow of the main river based on the precipitation and temperatures. And that's what Isabella will continue about.
All right. Thank you, Bernward. So we heard already, as a first step, we're trying to predict the stream flow from the weather. So our ultimate goal here is to make predictions decades into the future. So this comes with a few challenges, of course. So the premise is that we'll have weather predictions, as we've heard already, that include these climate scenarios. But of course, we don't have stream flow data available for the next 50 years or so. So we need a runoff model that works with meteorological data only, without ever relying on observed river flow as input. So what do we need for creating this model? First of all, or for training this model first, actually. So first we need we use historical precipitation and temperature data from the Geosphere Austria. And we also need flow data, because this is what we want to create, which we take from EHUD. Also, what we see on this map to the side is the catchment area of the lower Traisen up to Mühlbach. This is especially interesting because, or an interesting location, because this is where the mill stream starts shortly after. So we see this as quite a big region. So, to handle this spatial complexity, we break down this whole catchment area into smaller sub-basins. And each sub-basin gets its own meteorological time series from the meteorological data. So this is what we prepare before we start even modeling. So what else do we need? We need to consider snow, because this is a rainfall runoff model, and snow is a very important factor. Because, so especially for the lower Austrian part, for the southern lower Austrian part with the pre-alpine catchments, so we implement a simple degree-day snow model. The logic is quite straightforward. We just look at the temperature and say, okay, if the temperature is below a certain threshold, so it's cold enough, so if there is precipitation, it has to be snow. If it's higher, it's rain. And if there is snow, we say this snow is stored in the snowpack. And again, depending on the temperature, the melting water gets released gradually to the whole water cycle. We also validated this component independently as completely independently from the rest of the model against the snow grid data from the geosphere to see if it kind of works. And this is what we see here. This is just for 2 example sub-basins. We see the orange predictions for our snow data is quite accurate compared to what the blue original or the blue real data is. So, now what does our rainfall runoff model actually produce? These are the preliminary results of our XGBoost model. We trained on 36 years of data and predicted the following 4 years. These are 2 years of those prediction years. Again, the real values are in blue, our predictions are in orange. And at first glance, it looks rather well. It covers the peaks quite nicely. But let's zoom in a little bit on this rather straight line at the bottom, how well it really does. So there we see, yeah, okay, it's not perfect if we zoom in a bit. So, but it's also not that bad. It's still a solid result. And we also see the performance metrics below. I want to especially point out the NSE and the KGE for all of us, for all of you who are not familiar with hydrological performance metrics. This is the Nash-Sutcliffe efficiency and the Kling-Gupta efficiency. Those are very common benchmarks for hydrological runoff models. And to say the least, these values are quite competitive. So we are quite proud of this product so far. So now we have the foundation, we have predicted the water. Now let's go over to predicting the power. Again, we need to think, what actually do we need to predict power? We need power data. And in a perfect world, we could take turbine data directly. So that would give us the cleanest signal. But those are all individual setups, so it's a bit difficult to unify this data. Also, most of these plants are quite old, so they don't produce any digital data at all. Just as an example here. So we could only start this project because of the smart meter rollout in the last years in Austria, because now we have standardized data every 15 minutes through a standardized interface. But working with this data also comes with its own complications because they don't just capture what the turbine produces, but they capture the net exchange with the grid. So if someone is running machinery or using other sorts of power, drawing power from for whatever reason in this location, then of course the actual production gets reduced by this value. So this is also not clean data. Also there are planned and unplanned downtimes of turbines and water plants in general. We also don't know about them. So the data is a bit tricky. This is what we're actually going for. So this is the underlying physical relationship. This red line in particular, it shows us when the turbine produces. So below a certain threshold, it doesn't produce at all. But then it increases rather linearly compared to the water flow. And at one point, we reach the maximum intake capacity of the turbine, and then it plateaus. So it cannot produce more than that. And the blue points are examples from one of our own real plants. And we see this looks quite nicely. There are a few straggles here and there. But in general, this is one of the best data sets we have. So yes, so this is how we start. I will go over the next step a little bit because we're short on time. But let me say we did lots and lots and lots of comparisons, like which way to go. We start with the river water level. Do we need to calculate the runoff first? Do we need the millstream runoff, the water level? Can we go directly to the power? We did lots of tests with different models, and in the end, we skipped the millstream completely and just predicted the river runoff from the water level and then finally the power output. I will also not start this discussion. Maybe someone has the question later, then we can talk about this. And show you our final results. This gives you a sense what our model actually produces in practice. So the orange dots, again, are our predictions. The blue dots are the real measured values. And we can see that they track each other quite nicely, actually, over a 2-year period. But a quick disclaimer, this is done on cleaned data. So we removed periods that were obviously weird, let's say it like this, like inconsistent behavior of some current, either during downtime or due to a flood, whatever. So what you're seeing here is not quite the idealized turbine curve, but also not the fully messy reality. It sits somewhere in between. And this is what we're actually still working through. But so far, we're rather satisfied with our progress. We want to summarize shortly. Summarize shortly.
So now I'll give you a brief summary. So we have shown that machine learning models are well suited for the problem. But it's important to note that all the results depend on the accurate predictions of precipitation and temperature for the next decades. And the next steps in our project, we want to further improve our machine learning models. There is some student thesis about this topic. And next thing we also do, we want to model some different turbine types that different types can also be simulated in our program. And we also want to develop a demonstrator for communication purposes. So we hope that you found the presentation interesting. Thank you for your time, and we are happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much with your interesting insights on this research project. Are there any questions? We have time for 1 or 2 quick questions. If not, I will ask a question, and they're not as easy.
He's sitting in my room, so.
Okay, so if I remember correctly, you're talking about 50 of the small hydropower plants, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm just thinking out loud. So river flows in a direction, right? So there must be some up or downstream dependencies. So for example, if a power plant completely shuts off, it must have some kind of influence on a power plant down the river, not the road in this case. So do your model can actually work with this kind of dependencies, or are there dependencies between the power plants?
Yes, so in general, the power plants are decoupled, because they are linked by water, and water is very flexible. So, and there is also Energieerhaltungssatz. There's also a water Energieerhaltungssatz, so the water won't disappear between the power plants. But they are connected somehow because there are dams at the beginning of our mill streams, and depending on how many water comes through these dams, all of the power plants in these mill streams are affected by that.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the audience? Yeah, we have a small question here. Yeah. Julian, please, just wait a second for the mic, please.
Thank you very much. Can the mainstream be used to regulate the milling streams? For example, in case of St. Pölten, I know there is a milling stream, and also the Traisen River. Can the Traisen River be used to get more water into the milling streams?
The mill streams contain water from the Traisen, so this is taken from the Traisen. And if there's more water in the Traisen, there is generally a little bit more water in the mill streams, but of course they are limited. Do you mean we could take more water from the Traisen?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so right at the moment there are rules in place, regulations that say you can take exactly that much, but there has to be left at least, at the moment it's 500 liters per second, need to be left in the Traisen at any time. And if the water level is higher, still 10% of the Traisen has to remain in the Traisen, in the Traisen water. So these are the current regulations, but I mean, if the conditions change very much, then of course there might be reasons to adapt these regulations at one point. But probably not to remove more water, but probably rather to leave more water in the Traisen, to be honest here.
Thank you very much. Another round of applause for our speakers here. Thank you very much.